The following conversations are taken from our channel membership exclusive weekly live show that we do on Saturdays from 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time called Members Talk Live. Find out how you can become a member and appear on the show. All of the information is down in the description below, as well as all the links to the channels of today's guests. Check them out, and I hope to talk with you very soon. Happy Star Wars Day, everybody. As of this recording, it is May the 4th. Be with you. And so today we are going to rank the live-action Star Wars movies, all 11 that we've gotten. So I've got Ryan with me. I've got T with me, our beloved channel members. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And what do you guys think of Star Wars? I mean, I know that it's a little bit in a flux right now, but I'll start with T. Overall thoughts on Star Wars, how you got into it, where it began for you, and what you feel about it today.
So I got into Star Wars as a kid. I mean, growing up in the 80s, Star Wars was gigantic, right? It was on lunch boxes, thermoses, like they franchised the hell out of Star Wars. It was huge and it was huge. The first one came out before I was born. The last two came out when I was a really young kid. And I just remember being petrified of Darth Vader, like as a kid, just being petrified. Over the years, that love has kind of dwindled down. The nostalgia kind of got me for a little while, and then they went and made those prequels. Bless them for making those prequels. And then we got the last three, which kind of sealed Star Wars' fate. Because when I watched Last Jedi, which I actually enjoyed a lot, I went back and rewatched all of them, and I found this glaring thing. I grew out of love with Luke Skywalker himself.
What?
Like I've like that character, his character, Anakin's character in the prequels, just kind of and Kylo Ren's character. Like they all had the same characteristics. They all had the same character flaws. I've grown out of love with the Star Wars franchise over the years.
I don't think you're alone in that, man. I don't think you're alone in that at all. But Ryan, overall thoughts on Star Wars, how it began for you, and where did you feel about it now?
Well, where it began for me with the sacred text, Star Wars on VHS.
The Star Wars Trilogy on video. Now, the Star Wars Trilogy on video in THX. By the legend that rules the galaxy.
It is your destiny.
The original version of Star Wars on video. Buy it before it's gone forever.
My parents introduced it to me when I was 6 years old, back when VHS was just starting to be phased out. Like DVDs were well in production, but VHS was still holding on. You could still like buy like a VHS and DVD player. Now it's like, you ask Gen Alpha what VHS player, they'll be like, huh? While I would say there are a few Star Wars type stories that I didn't enjoy, overall, I still like Star Wars. I still enjoy it.
Nice. Yeah, for me, kind of similar to Ryan. I mean, I'm a 98 baby, so I saw Star Wars for the first time, I think, in 2000, probably 2004, because I was around 4 or 5 years old when I saw Star Wars. The first movies I ever saw was Free Willy and Star Wars A New Hope on VHS, but it still only said Star Wars. There wasn't A New Hope on it yet. So I still remember it as Star Wars. And, I just remember Star Wars being the thing as a kid, all the toys, the lightsabers in the aisles of Walmart and Toys R Us, and having to have them. Like watching the movies over and over and over again, collecting the action figures. Star Wars held on for a very long time. In middle school, I still liked it, but it wasn't really my like huge thing. And then high school, when Force Awakens came out, like reunited it again for a window, and we'll talk about why that is in a minute. But yeah, Star Wars, we're gonna rank them, we're gonna crap on them, but we're also going to celebrate them. We're gonna celebrate this universe, and let's not waste any more time. Let's kick it off. T, I will kick it off with you first, man, because you're the guest, and Ryan, you're just gonna give us your overall thoughts on Solo and Rogue One. You just want to rank the original 9. So we'll catch up to you at the original 9, and then we'll go from there. But T, give us your number 11.
Oh, I have a bad feeling about this.
The worst movie in the Star Wars franchise has to be The Attack of the Clones. This was such a bad movie.
What?
There specifically, it's the scenes with Padme and Anakin, and that's when I really did a deep dive on why I hated this character. Like he was fine in Phantom Menace, you know, when he was a boy. What Hayden Christensen was given was a travesty for anybody. Like it was slow, nothing about it. Like the whole Django Fett, like that whole arc was just lost on me. It made no sense why that was so important, at least to me. And it just didn't go anywhere. There was this, you know, of course, there was that whole uh, Attack of the Clones is the one where Yoda fought Count Dooku.
Yep.
Yes. So that was perhaps the only time that I enjoyed the movie for some reason. Like it was watching Yoda finally fight on screen. Like I thought that was pretty cool. And we got to see Sam Jackson a little bit in there, but it was the scene, it was the planet scenes, it was the romance scenes with Anakin and Padme that was just it was disgusting. It ruined that whole movie for me. Like I was in the theater like, why are we doing this? It was like it was 20 minutes too long of them just being there and him just like I get what they were trying to do is like try to get us to buy him fall into the dark side because of his love for her, but it was so bad.
You blew it!
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, Attack of the Clones is not that low for me. We'll definitely talk about it when we get there. But for my number 11, and Ryan, you can jump in on this too and give us your thoughts on this one. But my number 11 is Solo.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's at the bottom for me, not really for Alden Ehrenreich's fault, because I don't think he's at fault at all.
I got a really good feeling about this.
Coming in, taking over Harrison Ford's role as Han Solo is such a huge task for anybody. And I thought that Alden Ehrenreich, he did great with it, honestly. With what he had to work with, he really came up to the challenge. And same with Donald Glover as Lando, which I kind of like his take on Lando more than I like the original. Sorry, I forget. Oh, what's his name? I'm blanking on his
Billy
name.
D. Williams.
Billy D. Thank you. I had Brandon in my head for some reason. Billy D. Williams. Which he's great. Don't get me wrong, but there was something about Lando where I was like, ooh, he's just so smooth and suave by Donald Glover that I do enjoy the portrayal. The movie itself, though, it just kind of has a lot of things in it where I'm like, you're coming across as a fan film to me more than an actual movie. I'm pretty sure the point I checked out was when Han Solo got his name. That was just one of the most brain dead, stupidest scenes I've ever seen in Star Wars.
Who are your people?
I don't have people. I'm alone.
Solo.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
Like, my number one worst scene in Star Wars is that guy saying Han Solo because you don't have anybody. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, why did we need to do that? That's so stupid to me. Meeting Chewbacca is kind of cool, but the movie itself also, I think, is the ugliest looking Star Wars film that we've gotten because it's all just has this gray tint over it. The entire movie is just so colorless. It looks gross. I hate the look of this movie. I do think that the reshoots from Ron Howard do show through in the movie. The Kessel Run, I was so disappointed in the Kessel Run in this movie because in the original movie, Han Solo's acting like it's this big, huge thing that millions of people watched, and he's confused why Obi-Wan hasn't heard of it. But it's like this weird, gray, dark worm chase going on between him and one Imperial, and then he like at the end of it just nudged someone's on the shoulder like, hey, guess what, I just did the Kessel Run in like these many parsecs. And I'm like, that was the famous Kessel Run. Like I felt like they dropped the ball on so many Han Solo lore stories that I don't care about this movie. I haven't watched it since the theaters, and I have no desire to ever watch it again. So for that reason, for me, Solo, while it's not a horrible movie, I think it's a very poor Han Solo movie, and it comes in at the bottom for me in my Star Wars ranking.
I feel terrible.
Ryan, let us know your thoughts on Solo. Give us your overall thoughts.
All right. Well, so for me, actually, I enjoy it. I like if I were to give a review, I'd say 3.5 out of 5. I will admit it does have some perhaps pacing issues, but I actually kind of appreciate the reshoots, because here's the thing. I've read a lot about the whole reshoot debacle, and personally, based off what I read about Ron Howard and Chris Lord and Phil Miller and their directing styles, I think Ron Howard actually saved the movie, because again, Wikipedia says that he reshot about 70% ish, give or take, of the overall movie. It's practically remaking the movie. And so here, the pacing, for the first act, it feels off. Like it just has sort of an awkward rhythm to it. But once you get out of the first act, everything starts to really click together. And that first act, guess what? It compromises about 30% of the movie. So I think that's what Chris Lord and Phil Miller shot. And if the rest of the movie had been like that, I would not have liked the Han Solo movie very well. But anyway, so reshoot commentary aside, again, I like the movie. I'll concede your point about the Han Solo last name. It's like, again, it doesn't bother me nearly as much. But I get it. I'll concede that one. But everything else, I like the character. I like how Han Solo, like, you can recognize who he is, but you can recognize that, again, he's like Han Solo, but less jaded, and he's more trustworthy of people. I like the character development for that. The action scenes are fun. The storytelling is really good. The side characters, some are better developed than others. I kind of like Woody Harrelson as sort of the dark version of what he could have been had he not met Luke Skywalker and company. As for the Kessel Run, again, I don't know. I think that can sort of be attributed back to Han Solo overhyping himself. Plus, I don't know. I just kind of like the idea of him like underestimating how long it took him to make the Kessel Run. He's like, he goes to Chewbacca's like, I rounded down. I mean, that just seems like a totally Han Solo thing to do. And just the romance with I forget her name, but she was played by Emilia Clarke, Kira. I can't remember her name, but I remember the character. I found the romance very tragic, well set up. I don't know. It's a fun adventure movie.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. I mean, like I said, I don't think it's a horrible movie. I personally don't like it very much. T, line us up, man. Let's hear your number 10.
My number 10 is the number 9 in the franchise, The Rise of the Skywalker. I was not a fan.
I'm going to piggyback off right there with you, man, because that's my number 10 as well.
I remember going into Rise of Skywalker, hearing, the Emperor was back, and it made no sense to me. And then I watched the movie, and it further made no sense to me. So I'm a big fan of Lando Calrissian for many reasons. One reason is he was the only Black character in Star Wars, right? So Billy D. Williams coming back to the franchise was big. I thought that was fantastic that he was going to be back. But the way they roped him into this movie, it just didn't feel right. Like it was like, oh, he's back just for the sake of being back. And it was, of course, nostalgia bait. It was hoping to get, kind of course correct what The Last Jedi did. But this movie just felt wrong. And there was the one particular scene at the end when he rose the Empire's like fleet from this planet. In my mind, I was like, how the hell did they amass this massive fleet on this tiny planet? Like, it was just this massive fleet. And I was like, man, where did this all come from? That was really my only thought. To me, when I'm watching a movie, I like to suspend disbelief, right? So there are a lot of movies where people think, oh, these movies are terrible. But I'm sitting there like a kid in a candy store because I'm just having fun with the movie. And when I saw that fleet ride, I was like, where the hell I thought maybe one ship was going to come up. It was like thousands of ships just rose on this plane. I was like, what in the theater, I'm like, what is happening right now? Like,
I don't know, maybe Palpatine had villains on Uber. It's like, whoop.
Man, it was so out of left field. And of course, a lot of that could be blamed to The Last Jedi, which I'll speak about a little bit later. But yeah, this movie was just wasn't a fun movie for me. It didn't make me feel good at the end. It made me feel like this movie didn't deserve to be made. And it made me hate the Rey character more like towards the end of it, it was just like it just didn't hit. It just was it was a bad Star Wars movie for me.
I walked out of this movie with my head hung so low. Like the same with you with the Return of Palpatine, with the Return of the Emperor. I was so nervous about that because I was like, okay, either they have a vision for this or they're just bringing it back for the sake of bringing it back, trying to win the fans back over and totally compromising and negating the sacrifice that Anakin made with his redemption at the end of Return of the Jedi. They're going to throw all that out in the garbage just so they can try to win the fans back. And that's what it ended up feeling like to me. There was no reason for Emperor Palpatine to be here. It felt totally pandering. Somehow Palpatine, they couldn't even give us a reason. They literally didn't even give us a reason or any kind of explanation why he was back. Somehow Palpatine has returned is the worst line ever written in a movie.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
That's just lazy writing.
That is such lazy writing. That you just don't care. At that point, when you're not even trying to justify how you bring in a character back who should be dead and had a purpose for being dead, somehow he's returned. Never work in Hollywood again, as far as I'm concerned. Also, along with this movie, same with what T was saying, is it feels like course correction last minute. Because it's like Last Jedi came out and they were like, ooh, the fans didn't like that. Let's try to go back to what they like. And it just felt like pandering to us. It didn't feel like there was any passion or creativity behind it. The Lando showing up, yeah, totally just fan service, totally just nostalgia bait. There's some cool action sequences in it. It looks good because Disney has the billions of dollars to pour into these movies, but if you take away the colors and the facade of how it looks behind everything, it's just a mess and it's written horribly. And I hate that it's included. I hate that it is what started the tagline of the Skywalker saga, completing the Skywalker saga. It's like, get out of here with that Skywalker saga. I'll stick to the 6 movies I have. Thank you very much. But yeah, no, Rise of Skywalker made me so mad when I saw it in theaters. So that's my number 10 as well, for sure. And Ryan, before we get to our top or our 9s, I guess, give us your overall thoughts on Rogue One, and then we'll start with your number 9.
All right. Well, as for Rogue One, I enjoy it. I do. Like, at the time when I watched it, coming out of Force Awakens, I was like, okay, all right, I need a more original storyline. It's like Force Awakens, it's like, okay, I like Force Awakens, but come on, let's not do another greatest hits type repeat. And to its credit, Rogue One did not do that. And so I enjoyed it. I'll admit, some of the characters maybe weren't quite as fleshed out as others, but it was fun. K2SO easily steals the show. It's like, I can survive in space. The climax, I mean, much has been talked about the climax. It's just awesome. The visual style, I enjoy it. Yeah,
perfect. Yeah, Rogue One got a lot better for me after Andor, honestly. So we'll talk about that for sure coming up here. But Ryan, give us your number 9. Start us off.
All right, my number 9, Attack of the Clones. The only reason I have put it lower than Phantom Menace is because, for me, it's the difference between Anakin Skywalker and Jar Jar Binks. Because here's the thing. So both characters are generally, at least within the prequel movies themselves, pretty reviled. But here's the thing. George Lucas has himself admitted he created Jar Jar Binks to appeal exclusively to kids. And so,
and my wife, my wife loves Jar Jar Binks.
I mean, Jar Jar Binks, he is annoying as all hell. That being said, at least George Lucas had some level of self-awareness with that character. With Anakin Skywalker, from what I've read, like I have like this big gigantic book about the creation of Darth Vader. Yeah, it's a meaty one. And it also talks about the casting and how it sort of describes like Anakin Skywalker and their thoughts on what went into the writing of the character. I'm like, oh, you actually wanted us to kind of get on board with this character. It's like, no, because Anakin Skywalker, I mean, again, bless Hayden Christensen's heart. The dude can act when given proper writing and direction.
Shattered Glass, underrated. Hayden Christensen and Shattered Glass. Check it out.
Okay, all right. But yeah, in episode 2, it's like just, oof. And don't even get me started on that Tusken Raider monologue. He's a horribly written character, and he's an even worse acted character. Plus, combined with the awkward plot structure of Ewan McGregor going from CGI character to CGI character, getting spoon-fed expositional dialogue. It just makes for an awkward structure of a movie that pretty much backloads all of its action to like the Geonosis battle.
Yep. All right. All that is very fair. And yeah, that dialogue, man. My wife, we watched Attack of the Clones last night because we're going through the prequel trilogy. Well, we're going through all the movies again, but we're starting with the prequels because last time I showed her the original trilogy, then the prequels, and she didn't like that order, so we're going through the prequels first. And we just finished Attack of the Clones last night, and she was on board with Anakin until that monologue. As soon as he got to the Tusken Raiders, I hate them. She was like, and Padme likes this guy. Like she was like honestly on board with the Anakin and Padme stuff until that moment. And she was like, "Oh, red flags are up, girl. Like you should not be with this man." So even someone who was like on board with what George Lucas was doing with Anakin and Padme, that monologue flipped her, and she was like, "Actually, no, this is not good." So that's a testament to how bad that monologue is as well. T, you're number 9. What you got?
My number 9 is The Phantom Menace. Growing up as a kid, watching the original trilogy, and the original trilogy played on TBS in the States probably every other weekend, like comfort food, right? You just sit down and watch, Luke get his hand cut off, and just fun times, right? And then The Phantom Menace came out, and I can't remember what year it was. But
99.
I was
9, yeah.
Okay. That makes complete sense because there were guys. I was in the service already. And there were guys we would we got to go watch it. Midnight showing. So we went to a midnight. This is back when they truly had midnight showings of movies. So at midnight, we're watching a Phantom packed house that LucasArts comes on the screen. It was like or Lucasfilms comes on the screen, and it's like you heard the crowd. Yeah. Everybody was so hyped, and I left the movie feeling good. Right? I was like, man, Phantom Menace, that was okay. I wasn't one of those people. I didn't hate Jar Jar Binks immediately. Over time, this when the movie just kind of started dropping for me because you just started seeing things that were done better, and then you looked over. It was a beautifully shot. Like it looked so CGI. I didn't understand why they started with Anakin being a little boy. I thought that was a weird choice. I think you could have gone straight to him being a teenager and still had the same effect. I guess not, because that is what led to the Tusken Raiders. Like him, you had to see him as a boy. I guess you had to see the trauma he endured as a boy to, I guess, understand his trauma as a teenage man. But I felt this movie was so unnecessary. Like looking back on it, it just feels like something that could have not been, and we still could have gotten to where we got. The pod race scene, it was like revolutionary for the time. Like that was like that was one of the big things in Phantom Menace, and over time that's just kind of lost its luster. It's not a bad movie per se, but it's not a good movie. It's not a good Star Wars movie to me. Meeting and losing Darth Maul in the movie didn't help either. Like I thought the other movies would have definitely been better had he been lurking in the shadows. So that was a cool part of Phantom Menace, but then they lose him, and Qui-Gon Jinn, I feel like he was a throwaway character as well. Like over time, the movie just got worse to me. I thought at the time it was fine, but it wasn't a Star Wars movie. It didn't feel like an event. And after that, each movie kind of felt less and less like a major event.
So this is kind of the start of that for you, is where the eventness of Star Wars went off.
Yes.
All right. Honestly, I really appreciate you giving that perspective, because obviously I was one when Phantom Menace was coming out, so I don't have any memory of this because I just couldn't comprehend it. I've only ever heard the stories, so it's really cool that you were actually there during the hype, and how you've seen the legacy of the prequels go down. As far as my number 9, and now we're gonna get controversial up in here, I got The Last Jedi.
Oh,
and here we go.
And yes, you still haven't seen Attack of the Clones from me yet. So, The Last Jedi, honestly, I do lean more towards liking this movie than not liking this movie. I think that this movie does have some really interesting ideas when it comes to Luke and Rey on the island, where Luke's mindset is at, how he views the Jedi, how he views the Sith, how he views the Force, all that kind of stuff. I don't mind that. I find that very interesting and a very new angle to approach that stuff within Star Wars, which does have this fresh and unique feeling to it. But the rest of the movie is just bogged down by so much unnecessary just trash, really. I mean, the casino planet with Finn and Rose, where they go and like free the animals, like that feels like such a divergent to the rest of the plot and what's going on. The slow moving chase that's going on in space with Poe and Leia and all of them. It's not that engaging for me. I don't find it that interesting. And then Rian Johnson taking this movie to deconstruct Star Wars and try to like pick it apart. I don't enjoy watching that as a Star Wars fan very much, because it almost feels like Rian Johnson is insulting me for liking this movie or for liking this franchise.
I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong.
And he's trying to deconstruct the problems and issues within the franchise. And I don't know, there's something about the approach of the movie where I think it's very bold and ambitious, and there's things I like within it. But the overall feeling I get from it is, this person doesn't really like that I like Star Wars. That's how I feel when I watch The Last Jedi. And so it's one of those Star Wars movies that when I put on, I can watch it fine, but I don't feel like putting it on very often. So for that reason, I'm going to put The Last Jedi at number 9. Ryan, let's get your number 8 here.
All right, number 8, Phantom Menace. Fun fact, I actually got this through a cereal box. I think it was like on the back of a Wheaties box that I managed to get. It was pretty cool. It's like, I remember it's like one of the coolest DVDs I ever got as a kid.
I'm just going to jump off with Ryan. My number 8 is also The Phantom Menace.
All right, to that end, so like I said, this film, it hops over Attack of the Clones because it's the narrative structure, because again, it's not nearly as awkwardly structured a la Attack of the Clones, where you've got two separate storylines that are just so awkwardly done in terms of exposition. With this one, it commits to one not that great storyline, but it doesn't like try to sidetrack off. It's like, okay, we have now rescued the Queen of Naboo and now we need to hang out on Tatooine and fix things up and go to Coruscant and stop a genocide that is awkwardly alluding to the Rwandan genocide. But that's a whole other thing. Again, sort of in disagreement with Qui-Gon Jinn is a cool character. I mean, there's a reason why he's shown up in cameos all throughout the series. He's a fan favorite character, and I like him. But I will admit there are issues. For starters, the painfully awkward racial stereotypes. Uatu, he's, again, awkward Jewish, greedy stereotype. It's like, these are mind tricks, they don't work. It's like, I feel awkward just even mimicking the character. It's like,
mind tricks gonna work on me, only money.
Yeah. And then there's the Trade Federation, which is some sort of vague Chinese Asian stereotype, broken English. It's like, oof. And then there's Jake Lloyd.
I'm a person, and my name is Anakin.
Yeah, bless the little kid's heart. He did not deserve all the bullying he got, but he does not give a good performance. That being said, there are some fun stuff. The pod race scene, the sound design is phenomenal for that sequence. It's really fun. Mm-hmm. Darth Maul, I feel like the best thing to be said about Phantom Menace, and same could go for Attack of the Clones, it's sort of one of those cases where the prequel trilogy is more than the sum of its parts, where, again, each individual part may not be that great, but what it helps set up, particularly with regards to Clone Wars, Rebels, I enjoy it, and for that reason, I'm happy they exist, even if, those parts can be frustrating to sit through.
I don't hate this movie, but I'm not very entertained by this movie. I do think that George Lucas went a little too overboard with the political talk in this. I feel like a lot of the dialogue I'm disengaged with. The only portions of this movie I like are everything on Tatooine when we meet Anakin. I honestly think there's a lot of good stuff in there, especially between Anakin and his mom. When Anakin is leaving Shmi and he runs back towards her and like doesn't want to go, and she gives him that whole speech and like, don't look back, don't look back, and he walks off, and then John Williams' score kicks in. I get emotional at that scene. I think Jake Lloyd, I do agree, not the strongest actor in here, but that's George Lucas's fault, not the kid. I mean, he's the director. He needs to give the performance, right? And there are times, yes, where Jake Lloyd, he feels like a kid just reading his lines off of a script.
Are you an angel?
But I will give him credit in that scene with him and his mom when he has to leave, he kills it. Like, I think he does a really good job. And the actress of the mother does a good job there, too.
Will I ever see you again?
What does your heart tell you?
I hope so. Yes. I guess.
All this stuff with the pod race is a lot of fun. I still think, like T was saying, revolutionary for the time. I think it looks revolutionary still today. I think it looks fantastic. I'm always blown away by the pod racing scene, and the fact that it came out in 99 is just insane to me. So I enjoy all that. The Qui-Gon Jinn character, I think he's helped a lot by being Liam Neeson, because the character himself isn't really all that interesting to me. Once we get off before we get to Tatooine, I'm like, this is fine. We meet Jar Jar. We go to the Gungan planet or the Gungan place on Naboo. It's fine. The Tatooine
You sound
stuff,
in big trouble.
I hate the way the Gungans speak, by the way. I can't understand a thing they're saying. I know what subtitles on. I hate the way they speak. But everything on Tatooine, I'm like, okay, I'm locked in. I'm enjoying this. The dialogue's clunky, some of the acting's clunky, but the story feels like it's happening. And then we get off Tatooine, and I'm bored because we're talking about politics again on freaking Coruscant. And it's like the whole segment on Coruscant is just, get me off of Coruscant, please. Get me off Coruscant. And then the Darth Maul fight happens, and I'm like, okay, I'm engaged again. And then the movie's over. So there's really only like 2 segments of this movie that I actually really enjoy. The rest of it is just like a sludge for me to get through. But I do feel like this movie drags, and the pacing's a little bit rough, but I also don't hate it. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in at number 8 as well. But T, give us your number 8.
My number 8 might be a bit of a hot take, but Return of the Jedi.
You didn't see that coming.
Return of the Jedi. I went and saw that in the theater as a kid because my dad cared not about, like, the first movie I ever saw as a kid was 48 Hours. And if you know anything about 48 Hours, that is not a movie that a 5-year-old kid should be seeing in the theater. Like, it's simply not. So I did go see, and I want to say the third movie I remember going to see was Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. Once again, not a movie that a kid was like 7 or 8 years old. The 80s were a different time, guys. But Return of the Jedi infamously brings the Ewoks into the picture, who as a kid, of course, I loved. I was like, man, the Ewoks are so cool. Like, they're just little furry creatures. And apparently everybody else on the planet hated the Ewoks. They just really just despised that whole thing. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Ewoks' effect on Star Wars and another one of my movies that ranks higher. But it wasn't a bad movie. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not as good as the other ones. It can't, it had that super happy ending. I don't know why George Lucas had to go back and insert Qui-Gon Jinn and Anakin into the final scene where they're all like Force ghosts. I thought that was pretty funny rewatching it. And when he inserted all of those dead characters as Force ghosts, I just thought that was a little bit unnecessary, but maybe little fan service. But yeah, it was a good way to cap off the original trilogy. It left on a really positive note, and there was absolutely no reason to make more movies after the Return of the Jedi. But got to make that money.
No, I remember I had the VHS of Return of the Jedi where it was still the old man that came in as the Force Ghost at the end. It wasn't Hayden Christensen. And I remember as a kid, it took me a second to realize that was supposed to be Darth Vader. I just always was. I at first I thought for some reason it was like Uncle Owen or something like that. When I was a kid, I was like, is that supposed to be like Luke's dead dad from the first movie? Like, it was obviously Luke's dad, but I as a kid didn't pick up on everything. And then I remember the moment it clicked where I was like, oh, that's Darth Vader. Oh, that's kind of cool. Like, I got a little older, but yeah, and then they replaced him with Hayden Christensen and really hit you on the head with who that was supposed to be. Ryan, give us your number 7.
All right, my number 7. This is probably going to ruffle a few feathers. Rise of Skywalker.
Fun begins.
So all the things you've said about it, the Palpatine, I will concede. When the film focuses on Rey's connection to Palpatine, I'm like, what? I perfectly concede that. And I will also concede that this film is a bit messy in terms of structure. Like the pacing, it's maybe a little too fast, but again, it's not. Again, it's a bit off from some of the better Star Wars movies, but again, I've seen this series function at a much lower gear, a la Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones. So again, this pacing is not terrible, but it's just maybe a little off center is all. But here's the thing. So, and I will also acknowledge that the film functions as a course correction that Disney felt they needed to take after Last Jedi. More on that film later, but here's the thing. I still like the characters. They're still fun to watch. I enjoy the action scenes, and I know that this is probably going to be the biggest hot take of all. I don't mind the Rey Skywalker point because again, it sort of fits in with the themes of of Last Jedi and choosing who you want to be. And I don't know, I still like it, and that it fits with Last Jedi's themes of you don't need blood in order to be great, and Rey being allowed into Luke Skywalker and sort of getting to be his unofficial protege. I enjoy that, and also the film is still funny. I still like it, and just I don't know. I like the actors playing the characters. I like the characters themselves. Again, there's still plenty enough for me to like in this movie, but I will admit it is a messily structured movie. I will concede that.
For sure, man. Yeah, and never apologize for what you like, If it worked for you, it worked for you, and I'm glad it did. T, number 7, what you got?
Number 7 is number 1, A New Hope. Not a bad movie. It started it all. The original A New Hope was a very slow-paced movie. There was like a lot of scenes as a kid, you're just so wowed that you're on a different planet, and it's like, oh, this is so cool. But as an adult, you see these things again, and it just kind of drags. Like there are parts of it that drags a little bit. You're introduced to the characters, and I'll be totally honest, I despise the Luke Skywalker character. Like looking back on it, his character traits are annoying to me.
I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Like a lot of his character traits, and not really in the first one. I think it grows as it goes. Like I love Han Solo. He is by far like the star of the original trilogy to me. Harrison Ford really just knocks it out of the park. He is so much fun. He is the reason why I enjoy Star Wars as much as I do. Of course, The Empire Strikes Back, which we'll talk about later, kind of saves Luke. But like the first movie, like he's just like this whiny little kid that just like I know people like that and they annoy me too. So it just didn't do it. It just didn't do it for me. Once again, not a bad movie. Like it really is an iconic film, but like holding up against the other films, it just wasn't as fun for me as some of these other films are.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. We'll definitely talk about the Star Wars later on because I got it much higher than you do. Another thing, I have a lot higher than you guys do. There it is. Ooh. Attack of the Clones at number 7.
You were the chosen one.
It's not great. I'm not gonna be too much of a defender for it, but there is a lot in it I like. This is the movie where I feel the pacing the most. This movie goes on, like Ryan was kind of saying, 20 minutes longer than this movie needs to go on for. But one thing that it has over the Phantom Menace is more emotion. Whether or not you want to criticize how much emotion or how the emotion is displayed. Totally valid.
I hate them.
Totally valid. Totally valid. But in the Phantom Menace, everyone just talks so monotone, and I just get bored by watching their mouths move. Here, at least they actually feel like characters to me, and at least they actually feel like they're emoting more. I enjoy the side plot with Obi-Wan Kenobi going after Jango Fett, even though the mystery of it all ends up being kind of lackluster. I do kind of enjoy the mystery aspect that's played within there, along with Anakin and Padme's relationship. Look, it's rough. It is rough. But there are honestly moments in there where I'm like, I can see the chemistry between Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman. I can see what George Lucas is going for. The scene where they're on the field and they're talking about like politics and what Anakin thinks politics should be versus what she thinks politics should be. Kind of a little glimpse into Anakin's ideology, and you can see how he becomes Darth Vader with one government that controls everything, and everyone should be made to agree. You can kind of see the planting of seeds there, where it's like, this guy may not be the greatest, person to be around. But there are moments that I think are kind of cute between him and Natalie Portman. A lot of moments that I think are rough with really tough dialogue to swallow for sure. But I can kind of see through the crap and see the vision that was there. When I see the vision that's there, I kind of do like it. I do think that the I don't like sand bit, out of context, I've used it too, is a little bit trashed on more than I honestly think the line deserves. Because the context of the scene where Natalie Portman's Padme is describing her summers on Naboo and how she would lay in the sand on the beach and how it was like this romanticized fantasy in her mind of memory. Then you compare that to Anakin's experience on Tatooine with sand and how it reminds him of a desolate place and no hope, and how he gets into that conversation, the contrastion, the compare and contrast of how they view sand. I like the concept. The dialogue is a little bit rough around the edges for that, for sure, but I kind of like what they're getting at there. I enjoy Anakin back on Tatooine, and all the stuff with his mother, I think works pretty well, honestly. Like the fact that he had these dreams of his mother dying, tries to save her, has her in his arms, and she dies in his arms, which causes that rage to come out. And then we get into Revenge of the Sith, and the whole crutch of him turning to the dark side is he's having the same visions on Padme, and he just cannot go through that again. That if there's any hope of saving her, I'm going into Revenge of the Sith a little bit too much. I'll save that for a little bit later. But there are ideas in Attack of the Clones that I really latch onto, that I really like. It's just the execution that really bogs this movie down for me, that really does hurt it. And along with the Geonosis scene, I enjoy that scene quite a bit. It goes on a little bit too long, but when all the Jedi come out and attack the droids and all that, I have a lot of fun with that sequence. I really do. Attack of the Clones is a very, very flawed movie, and I agree with everything that everyone says. I just find more in it than I think most people do, to the point that I can put it at number 7 pretty comfortably. So that's where I'm going to leave it there. And we'll move on now to Ryan's number 6.
Okay. Well, appropriately enough, Revenge of the Sith. So, I mean, again, I like this one. I rank it above Rise of Skywalker because I will concede that Revenge of the Sith, it's a much more consistent movie in terms of narrative. And I feel like the politics actually kind of works a bit better in this movie and is better integrated because the Jedi Council, they want Anakin to be a mole, to spy on Palpatine. I like that. And again, it's kind of been memed to hell and back again. But like, honestly, again, the Mustafar battle is actually... it's well done. The dialogue is rough, but you can see the characters are actually managed to muscle emotion out of that. And you can see the heartbreak on Obi-Wan's face at the very end when poor Anakin's getting barbecued to death. Again, this is where, like, I think it's as you said, I think the prequel trilogy, it kind of gets lost in the techno babble and the mumbo and the politics and forgets the emotion. I feel like Revenge of the Sith is where George Lucas finally managed to get that emotion into it, into the equation. Plus Hayden Christensen, I think this sort of plays into what you said, but like the moment with Padme where he finds out he's going to be a father, you can see him go through a range of emotions from like, yeah. But yeah, it's like you said there. Plus, the action scenes are a lot more engaging. You get to see the Wookiee planet of Kashyyyk. That's fun. It's lent itself to some fun video games. Star Wars Battlefront 2. Again, but yeah, I feel like Revenge of the Sith, it's like unlike episodes 1 2 where you say, but it was so good a setup for Clone Wars or Rebels. Revenge of the Sith you can enjoy in and of itself. You don't have to, it doesn't need retroactive justification.
I completely agree with everything you said, and we will talk about that on my list a little bit along here. But T, your number 6, what you got?
My number 6 is The Last Jedi. So I do not hate The Last Jedi as much as everyone else does. The only reason that I don't hold The Last Jedi higher is I felt like The Last Jedi should have been the conclusion of a trilogy, not the creamy filling in the middle of a trilogy, because it
I like that creamy filling in the middle.
It boxed Star Wars in such a corner. Like, I remember leaving the theater of Last Jedi, and I was like, "Where do they go from here? Like, how do you like, is it a time jump?" And that's what I thought. I thought they would time jump, 10 years or something like that down the line, because it was, to me, The Last Jedi was Luke Skywalker's redemption story. That last battle, I thought, like, I was like, Luke Skywalker's a badass, and before that, I had the complete opposite feelings of Luke Skywalker, even though, he brought balance to the Force. Like, he was just such this, like, he was, I guess, a product of his times too. But they brought Mark Hamill back. I was wondering how they were going to use him in this movie, and he was the grumpy old man. He was me. He was the grumpy old guy, and he, like, you know what? If I have to go out on my sword, I'm gonna go out on my sword in the most badass way. I'm gonna force project myself across the universe. I'm gonna fight this guy, and I'm gonna give the Jedi a chance to get out of there. And the scene that made Last Jedi higher on the list to me is, a lot of people didn't like it. It was the Laura Dern scene where they were doing that low speed chase throughout the universe. When she crashed that ship into the other ship, and it was complete silence, that
Beautiful
was
shot.
That was amazing.
Man, I was the only person in the theater. I gasped out loud. I was like, because it was this huge epic explosion. But it was silence.
Oh yeah,
it's very
I thought
striking.
that was
Yeah.
Yes, I thought that was so beautifully done. Perhaps one of the best scenes that I've seen in Star Wars, only because of the effect itself. And of course, the hero sacrifice. And Carrie Fisher had passed away, I think, right before Last Jedi came out. So it was like every scene they were teasing her to die in the movie. I thought that was a bit tasteless.
Poor timing.
But extremely poor timing. As a whole, I thought the movie was good. I enjoyed the movie. It just boxed them into a hole that gave us Rise of Skywalker, and I can't forgive them for that. Like, I just, it really should have ended the trilogy. I think you could have spun off a lot of different things with just, a slight tweak to the ending, but every trilogy doesn't have to end on this extremely positive note. Yeah, that's why it's my number 6. I thought it was a good movie. It would have ranked higher if Rise of the Skywalker would have truly concluded the series in a good way. But because it boxed Star Wars into a corner, I rated it a little bit lower.
For my number 6, I got Rogue One, Star Wars story. Which is a movie that has grown on me a little bit more. I liked it. Like, when I saw it in theaters, I remember liking it. One of the best, if not the best, Darth Vader scene in the entire series at that end there, where he's taking out all those rebels. I was in the theater when that red lightsaber got ignited in the dark. I was geeking out so hard. I loved that scene so much. Still love that scene so much. Battle on Scarif is phenomenal. The battle up in space, on the ground, they're trying to get the plans to the ship. I love the third act of this as well. The first and second acts of this movie, though, are very rough for me, especially with the amount of characters that were in it. Now, after Andor, that character has grown a lot more on me when I watch this back again. Because when I first watched this movie, I liked Jin. I liked the blind Jedi. I thought he was cool. Andor didn't really care. The other guy didn't really care. The other guy, I don't even remember his name. The one that had the gun, I don't remember his name. Didn't really care. I liked K2SO, but there wasn't really much that I was latching onto character wise. And characters are a big part of movie watching for me. If I love the characters, I'm pretty much into the movie. If the characters are wishy-washy for me, even if the narrative's great, sometimes it's tricky to get me into it. And I kind of felt like that kind of happened with Rogue One, where the characters didn't feel strong enough to me or memorable enough to me. Again, I go back to the guy with the gun is the only thing, the only way to describe the other guy. I don't really remember his name. But after Andor and after fleshing out that kind of side of Star Wars, going back to watch Rogue One, I did find that I latched on a little bit more to Andor with Jin. Like I said, the third act is great. So this one used to be a little bit lower for me, but it's risen up a bit more, and I like it a little bit more than I did before because of the Andor show mostly. But yeah, that comes in at number 6 for me. Let's move into our top 5. Ryan, kick us off. What's in your top 5?
All right, top 5. Force Awakens. This film was the first Star Wars movie I ever got to see in a theater, and it was amazing. I remember like everyone was just so pumped, and just even the advertisements for Star Wars toys was making everyone giddy. It was one of my favorite movie experiences ever. I'm not sure if anything's ever going to top that. Now, as for the movie itself, I really enjoy it. I think it's like you said, the characters. The characters are engaging. Finn, I enjoy him as a turncoat stormtrooper. Rey as an abandoned orphan on pseudo Tatooine. Let's just call it pseudo Tatooine. I mean, there's plenty of differentiating stuff. There's the whole scavenger community and everything, and I don't know, and the fact that it seems to be a wreckage for Empire ships.
Yeah.
Again, but yeah, I enjoy Rey. I enjoy Poe. He doesn't get as much screen time, but thankfully he gets more in the next film. I'll get to that later. But again, I enjoy the characters. I enjoy Kylo Ren. I wish maybe the story was more original, but again, I didn't mind it. It still has plenty of heart and original characters to it. And Harrison Ford as Han Solo, he says probably one of my favorite lines. It's like Finn's like, "Oh, we're going to break in." It's like, "What was your job here again?" Sanitation. Sanitation. And then Finn's like, "But don't worry, we'll use the Force." To which Harrison Ford goes, "That's not how the Force works." You can just see the levels of anger and frustration. And this is coming from a guy who didn't even believe in the Force at first. It's like, it's the fun, most gut-busting moment of the entire movie. And seeing the poor guy get lasered, sliced in half, and fall down a giant chasm. Because it's not Star Wars unless you fall down a giant hole. Yeah, again, I like it. I wish it had been more original, but still a fun movie all around.
All right, fair enough. T, number 5. What you got?
Number 5, Solo.
I got a really good feeling about this.
I did not go see. That is the only Star Wars movie that I did not see in the theater. I want to say I was deployed at the time that movie came out. But also another reason I don't think that I went and saw it in the theaters because everyone was bagging on it. Everyone was, "Oh, this is the worst Star Wars movie ever." And I wasn't deployed because I think I just made a fair assessment to not go see it in the theater. And that was a critical mistake on my part because I watched it months later and I had such a fun time with it. I thought it was a fun movie. It did exactly what it set out to do. It had the heart and feel of the original trilogy. It had the heart and feel of Han Solo. I think Alden Ehrenreich,
I think.
Alden Ehrenreich, I think he gets unfair criticism. He's a great actor, by the way. I've seen him in other things, and he's a really, really good actor. I think he just got hit by that toxic Star Wars fandom who, let's de-age Harrison Ford and make him a young Solo.
Stupid idea.
No,
terrible idea.
We tried that with Indiana Jones. It did not work very well.
You could not do a full movie like that.
But I thought he was fine. I thought he, got all the mannerism down. We got to see Chewie. We got to see a young Lando Donald Glover killed that role. I just thought it was a fun movie. I don't hate it as much as every other Star Wars fan does because I don't
What other Star
hold
Wars fans? What are you talking about?
everyone else. Like seeing like I remember going online and just seeing it was just getting dumped on and dumped on. And I would talk to people and oh, that movie was terrible. And I just didn't see it. It was fun to me. It wasn't it did what it set out to do was just tell a fun story. The Kessel Run thing I thought was funny because yes, Han hyped it up to be this amazing grand thing, and it wasn't. It was just a thing that he did, and but until his death, he's gonna hype that up. Even in Force Awakens, he brings it up like as if you don't know that I did this. Like nobody cared, but he cared, and it was so big in his heart. And that was a cool move. That was a cool moment in the movie, getting to see that get done. But in the grand scheme of things, it really didn't matter, which I thought was funny, which made me laugh because it was like, oh, cool, you did that. Good job, man. Like, I thought that was funny. It was little things like that that just I made me enjoy the movie more than I thought I would.
I do appreciate that perspective because I never really thought of it in that context of Han Solo just kind of hyping it up in his own mind, but like it's not really a well-known thing. That's interesting. I didn't think of it in that way. I appreciate that perspective, and I'm glad you really like the movie, dude. I'm glad it worked for you. For number 5 for me, Return of the Jedi. This was my favorite of the original trilogy when I was growing up, when I was like in elementary school still. And then now it's my least favorite of the original trilogy, but I still really enjoy it. I think it's got a really fun opening where we pick up after Empire Strikes Back, where we go to get Han from Jabba the Hutt. We get the Sarlacc pit. We get the fight on there. We get Luke with his green lightsaber, like busting that out. Like, come on, as a kid, that was probably my first geekgasm. Was when Luke busted out that green lightsaber. I was like, they can be green. That's awesome. And I still find so much fun to be had. And it's like the first act of the movie. It's like 30 minutes long. Like it goes for a while, that Jabba the Hutt rescue scene. And I think it's just a blast. I think it's so much fun. The middle of the movie kind of starts to lose me a little bit because I don't hate the Ewoks. I just feel like the movie slows down when we get onto Endor. Is that
Endor? The moon of Endor.
Yeah, I feel like when we get there and we're in the forest and we're with the Ewoks, it kind of slows down for me a bit, but then it picks right back up again because what they absolutely nailed was the redemption of Darth Vader. Luke going to Vader, having that confrontation, still probably my favorite lightsaber battle in the entire franchise because of the emotion and all the history and stuff behind it as Luke is fighting Vader but not wanting to kill him, trying to bring him back, ending with Darth Vader's redemption, killing the Emperor, and Demon Anakin Skywalker. I just think like what they needed to nail for the end of the trilogy, I felt like they absolutely nailed. Like I said, the middle portion of the movie, I might fast forward a little bit through it when I watch the Return of the Jedi again, but the highs are so high and the fun is still there that it's still going to come in my top 5 for Star Wars movies. Moving on to number 4, Ryan, what you got?
Well, Return of the Jedi. It's kind of funny. The first time I watched it, it was on VHS and it had been wound all the way back. So I actually started out around the Sarlacc pit. So it wasn't until like, my second or third viewing that I finally got to see like the film actually begin, with the Emperor coming in and Darth Vader's like, and I love how at the very beginning Darth Vader's like, hey, you know how I'm evil? Well, there's another guy and he's even worse.
We shall double our efforts.
On it. Okay. All right. Double mandatory overtime. No breaks. Yes. We're canceling our bonuses. Close the 3-ring circus.
Yes. Spaceballs is my number 1.
Mel Brooks is still alive. We could still get Spaceballs 2.
Oh, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. I don't want them to do it. Don't touch it. It wouldn't work. Anyways, go on with your Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, I enjoy Return of the Jedi, but yeah, I think I can see what you mean about the slow parts, but I still think even then the slow parts still have some fun drama to it. The speeder bike chase still looks amazing to this movie. I feel like it's definitely aged pretty well. of the original trilogy. There are let's be real here. There are some special effects of Star Wars that haven't maybe aged the best. I mean, but still, I feel like the speeder bike chase has aged pretty well. And then there's Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, and then just the interaction between the Luke, Han, and Leia, especially out on the bridge, and they're having hearts to heart. And Leia, she gets this really heartfelt monologue about her mom. Granted, it kind of gets blown up when you remember, how the prequel trilogy ends it, but in the moment, it works. And I guess again, this probably comes from the fact that I saw it when I was 6, but I don't mind the Ewoks. It's Warwick Davis. He's fun as Wiki. He's like, yep. I don't know. He's a cute little teddy bear. What can I say?
Yeah. I mean, I like it. I don't mind it, but it definitely is like where cutesy Star Wars kind of begins. Like, oh, this is cute. This is cutesy Star Wars, but it's like decent. Like, I don't hate it.
I mean, for what's worth, I would argue a little bit against. They do have a bit of an edge. Like, I mean, they bong they use stormtrooper helmets as drums, and they do get pretty brutal. I don't know. I think it's just kind of an off camera. Well, we're 80s PG, so that basically means it's PG-13.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. T, number 4, what you got?
Number 4, I got Revenge of the Sith.
Ooh, nice.
So I went into Revenge of the Sith with the lowest expectations ever for a Star Wars movie. I went in there after Attack of the Clones. I was over Star Wars as a whole. And I went into Revenge of the Sith, and it saved it. Like, that movie saved the prequel trilogy for me. The Anakin scene, like when he goes in and takes out the kids, I don't know why I found that to be so funny. I probably should not have laughed as much as I did. It was like they just looked up and here he was, like walking up, like,
Skywalker, what are we going to do? What do you mean, we, kid?
Man, like, but he's really about to do this, man. He's really about to go kill all these Jedi kids. But also just the way the politics all came together. Like, I don't know if I was living under a rock or I just wasn't paying attention enough. But like when Palpatine revealed himself, I was like, holy, it all made sense. It was like, oh, like what? Like, because I'm the most anti-political person ever. I don't enjoy engaging in political talks. And I felt like the first 2 prequels, a lot of it was this political talk of stuff that I truly cared nothing about. It was like, man, all right, people were making power plays. I don't care. Where's the lightsabers? Like that was my mindset whenever they would have these like overly drawn out conversations about, politics. Well, this planet's trying to do this and we have to do that. When they finally got the whole council together, I was like, oh, this is cool. And it was one scene, it was just like, it really just all clicked in my head. I was like, oh shit, Palpatine's the one. The whatever his title was, I was like, oh man, this guy. And then when he, like, of course he starts doing the facial transformations, I was like, oh, this guy's the Emperor. That made, like, that's awesome. That was the genius of the prequels, was the fact how they did that. And like a casual like myself, I wasn't so invested into it until that portion. And then he has to fight with Yoda, which I thought was completely badass. And the funniest scene in all Star Wars movies, I don't care what anybody says, when Mace Windu gets his arms cut off. I don't know if you guys watch all Samuel Jackson movies, but Samuel Jackson loves to yell in his movies. And when he got his arms cut off and he started yelling, I laughed so hard in the theater. I was the only person who found that funny. Because it was so, he just, and he's like yelling super loud, and it's so Sam Jackson. And I thought that was great. I hold this in very high regard. I thought it was the best prequel, by miles.
Yeah.
It just was it was a good movie. Of course, the fight between Obi and Anakin, like there was so much ferocity in that. Like I felt like finally I felt like Hayden Christensen got it. I think that's when he was in his bag, when he was just this angry human being. Every other scene that he was in just didn't do it for me. But when he was like that fight scene with Obi, just I thought it was done perfectly, and I was really engaged in the film at that point as I was watching it, and that concluded the prequels the way Rise of Skywalker should have concluded. Not saying it had to end on this like dark note, because it was a dark note. He became Vader, but like it had this energy, it had this feeling, and it was emotional. It was emotions that I actually cared about. So I really thought that Revenge of the Sith truly righted almost all of the wrongs of the prequel trilogy to kind of close it out in a positive note.
My number 4 is going to be The Force Awakens. Does this movie get hurt by the way that the trilogy ended up concluding? Yeah, kind of does. Does it retread old water? Yeah, kind of does. Do I still enjoy it? Heck yeah, I do. I like The Force Awakens quite a bit. I think that it is a good reintroduction to the Star Wars universe. I think the similarities to A New Hope, kind of reminding you of A New Hope, honestly were a benefit for me watching the movie than it was a takeaway for me when I was watching the movie. Hot take, but if you're comparing Darth Vader in A New Hope in the very first Star Wars movie, his first introduction, to Kylo Ren's first movie in his introduction, I think Kylo Ren's the better villain in The Force Awakens compared to Darth Vader in A New Hope. Because in A New Hope, Darth Vader's kind of more the lackey almost. In a way, he's like this super powered bodyguard in some ways, is the way he's kind of treated for most of the movie. Whereas Kylo Ren, he comes out and he was really, really enticing of a character to me when he first got introduced. I thought he was used very well, and the way that they kind of unmasked him in the first movie to show who was behind the facade of Kylo Ren, I was really into all that. I really liked Rey as a character. I thought that she was a very strong female lead for this movie. I really liked Finn as well, and their relationship, the way that it developed, the fact that he was a stormtrooper that then joined their side. Thought all that was great. The inclusion of Han Solo in this movie, I absolutely adore. I love the way that Han Solo is, especially since this is his last movie. He gets killed off in this movie, which in the theater, I remember weeping when Han Solo got killed on that bridge and fell down there. Like that moment where it went in the trilogy, kind of hurts now because there was never really anything with Luke and Leia and the three of them together, anything like that. But in this movie, for that moment, for the character of Kylo Ren, I thought it was very effective, and I still think it's pretty effective when I watch it. And Chewbacca's scream when Han Solo dies, man, like I think that's what got me the most. The action's super fun. I think the story is really fun, and it was just a moment where that, like I kind of mentioned before, that reignition of my love of Star Wars came back with The Force Awakens. I thought they did a really good job with this, and it was a great reintroduction, and I thought it was just a good movie that unfortunately led to some lesser movies. But I'm still going to hold it as on a movie on its own, and for that reason, it comes in as my number 4. It's top 3. We're burning through these. Let's do this. Ryan, top 3. What you got?
Well, I've been putting this off, but Last Jedi.
All right, there's the controversy.
All right, so again, like this is one of my top 3 movies for a reason. I enjoy all of it. Like even the Canto Bite scene, like that's where Finn's character development comes. It's like because like when he left the Empire, it was only because he was just like, oh yeah, this is getting too real for me. I'm out. But like seeing him see what's at stake here, getting to meet DJ, that's not the character's official name, but it's sort of like what he's been officially dubbed. But the character and seeing the two paths he could go down, the more nihilistic route with DJ or the more hopeful route with Rose, seeing Poe evolve into less of a hotshot and more of a leader and becoming more strategic. Like I love the Holdo character. She doesn't get a lot of love. I love her. Like she is a great character. I enjoy her as well. Again, Luke Skywalker, like easily Mark Hamill's best performance to date. Like even for T, like he did not like Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy. Even he was on board with this version of Luke Skywalker. I kind of love him. Plus Mark Hamill, he gets a great job. He gets really good with the laughs. It's like at one point he's like, "Where are you from, Ray?" And she's like, "Nowhere." It's like everyone's from somewhere. And she's like, "Jakku." It's like, yeah, Jakku! All right, fair enough.
That's what it is.
for what it's worth, I looked it up on Wikipedia, but yeah, it's
Okay.
Jakku. But yeah, I love the characters. I love the visuals. The film looks beautiful and stunning, and the action scenes, like just the overall sort of odd cold open with the attack on the dreadnought and Rose's sister. It's just amazingly well done. I love watching it. The pacing, it does maybe get a little long near the end, but even then, it's not that bad. And then there's the climax, the amazing setup with the salt and how Luke doesn't change the salt pattern while Kylo does. It's just amazingly set up. And Leia, yeah, man, Leia. I mean, again, if I might insert a hot take, they really should have just killed Leia off in the beginning, or just sent her off to another side of the galaxy in Rise of Skywalker instead of doing that awkward, fake repurposing unused footage from Force Awakens. But I digress. I really enjoyed Last Jedi. One of my top 3 favorite Star Wars movies.
Awesome, man. I'm really glad that it worked that well for you, dude. And like I said, I lean more to liking it than not liking it. T, what you got for number 3?
Number 3 is The Force Awakens. I absolutely loved every second of this movie. I don't think that I could have, like, this movie going from the prequels. Like, I had very low expectations because of what they did with the prequels. So I assumed the first one was going to be this slow meandering, getting to know, like, that slow, first few date phases of getting to know someone. But no, they jumped straight into it, and this was nostalgia bait. This was everything fun about Star Wars, all wrapped into one film, and it had Han Solo and Chewie, like who were my favorite characters by far. And Kylo Ren was a great villain, even though he was a Skywalker and he had all of the same traits as Anakin and Luke. The traits that I didn't like, he was like this whiny, self-obsessed, like just douche of a character, which they did this undercover boss for Saturday Night Live with Kylo
I saw
Ren.
that. It's so funny.
Funny.
Yeah.
Like, but it encapsulated his character so well. Like,
what you think of my lightsaber? It's like, oh, it looks all red and angry and poorly put together.
like it's but it really does capture that character. Like, but this movie, when he kills Han Solo, and if you haven't seen it, that is a spoiler. Like, Han Solo dies in Force Awakens, but it meant something. Like, it felt so powerful with like the scene, with the atmosphere. Everything about this movie worked to me. And this movie probably brought out the most toxic Star Wars fans, which in turn gave us The Last Jedi, which then in turn gave us, Rise of Skywalker. I think if they would have they didn't have to remake every Star Wars movie moving forward, but they could have kept that same energy that this movie had, that same fun and flight of fancy. Like, it was just a fun movie. It wasn't too dark. It wasn't too light. It was just like this perfect in between of action. And I had so much fun watching this movie. It was, Finn, Poe, Rey, they were great new characters that somehow they managed to mess up in the other 2 movies. They had a great start. It was like a running start. And it was the fandom. And this is why I don't hold Star Wars movies as high, because the toxic fans of the Star Wars universe just will figure out a way to ruin everything that, is fun for the sake of, I don't even know what anymore.
Canon. It's like the all holy canon.
I guess.
All hail George Lucas. All hail George Lucas.
But I definitely had a lot of fun with Force Awakens.
My number 3, Revenge of the Sith. This one has been talked about before, so for all the reasons that T and everyone else has said, absolutely. The fights are great. We start off with the rescue of Palpatine, and that whole sequence is fantastic. We end with the fight on Mustafar. Very, very well choreographed. I really enjoy watching that fight. But for me, this is where the story finally got set into place. This is where I was finally able to latch on to what this story was, because in this movie, I finally understood the character of Anakin a lot more, where it's like he's with the Jedi Council. The Jedi Council just constantly treats him as this like lesser than. He can't get this promotion, if you want to call it that. He can't make his ranking up. He feels like he's being held down, being held back, where he's got all this great potential. And who's seeing that potential? Palpatine, the Emperor. He keeps feeding into Anakin that he can give Anakin what he wants, to the point that it gets to the point where the Jedi become hypocrites in Anakin's eyes, wanting him to spy on the Emperor, and that's treason. But if the Jedi do it, it's fine if it's treason, apparently, which totally rubs Anakin the wrong way. And that's when Palpatine's able to snatch in there and just be like, what's the number one thing you want? You want the ability to save Padme because you couldn't save your mother? I can give you that. Boom. Hook and sinker, got Anakin there, and he turns to the dark side. For me, this was the movie that clicked it all, as well with the politics like T was talking about. You really see the overall arcing plan of Palpatine from Phantom Menace to this movie, and when you follow the breadcrumbs back, as messy and muddly as they can be, his plan's brilliant, and it works, and it gets him to where he's at. So the whole politics side that I wasn't a big fan of in the prequels clicks for me. Anakin, who's a little bit of a wishy-washy character in the first two for me, but I like the concept of that. Concept feels fully realized for me in Revenge of the Sith. You got some of the best Star Wars action. This movie is just like candy. It's like cotton candy at times, where you can just put it on. You can just turn off the audio if you wanted to. Some of you probably prefer to, and you can just watch the visuals at play, and it's so fun and it's so gorgeous. And I get real emotional when Obi-Wan is yelling at Anakin, "You were the chosen one. You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you," as he's burning to death on Mustafar. I feel like they needed to get that moment, if not perfect, they needed to get it shot well and done well. And I feel like they were able to get it done well, to the point that it felt effective. Then you have, Padme giving birth to Luke and Leia, contrasting that with Darth Vader's birth. I think is just gorgeous. I love the way that those scenes are cut together. You feel the pain of Anakin as he's putting on the Darth Vader suit. It brings so much more to Darth Vader as a character for me, to the point that I just, flaws and all, love this movie. Love it. It's definitely the best of the prequel trilogy, and I think one of the best top 3 Star Wars movies we've gotten up until this point. We're almost in the clear. Number 2. Give it to us, Ryan. What's number 2?
All right. Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit. This might throw off your little card title game a bit, but
okay.
These, I'm tying them for first place.
I will allow it.
4 and 5. I don't know. Just like I said, I enjoyed them equally as much. It's iconic moments all around. The lightsaber, the reference of the Clone Wars world building, Darth Vader himself, like that very moment, and you hear his theme. It's like, like, again, I was 6 years old. My ability to follow narrative wasn't that great, but in that moment, I knew this was the big kahuna of the movie. Like, he's going to be where all of our problems begin and end. And seeing Obi-Wan and Ben Kenobi die, like getting sliced in half, all the way to the Luke, I am your father. Like, that movie blew my mind. Like, because there was an article research that was done, and how like anyone 7 and above believed Darth Vader. Anyone below that age didn't. And I was 6 years old, so I was like, nope. And so that's the reason why Yoda's all, yeah, Luke, yeah, he is your father. Sorry. And I'm surprised Luke didn't go all, yeah, that would have been good information to know yesterday. but yeah, it's amazing moments all around. Seeing Han Solo get frozen in carbonite, because Harrison Ford already wanted out of the franchise as far back as episode 5, but he kept coming back even for the video game. But yeah, it's just fun all around. And if I might note, Revenge of the Sith is the only prequel film that made me cry.
T, number 2, what you got?
Number 2, Empire Strikes Back. That's like, that movie as a kid, I will tell you guys a little secret. As a kid, I used to have nightmares about Darth Vader. Like, I had this recurring dream where Darth Vader was chasing me, and I was running through corridors trying to make it to a starship to get away from him. And it's because of the Empire Strike. Like, he was such a menace in this movie. Like you said, in the first one, he felt like more of a bodyguard, but in this one, he's like a fully fleshed out villain. We get to meet one of my favorite characters, Lando Calrissian. for reasons that I stated earlier. Like I like that whole him and Billy D. Williams and Han Solo and Harrison Ford. They had this real camaraderie. Then of course he stabs him in the back. Like once again, as a being a kid and watching Luke get like he gets his hand cut off and like he's so desperate and you're like, is this dude about to die? Like as a kid, I'm like, yo, is he about to die? Like he's hanging on with one arm and it's like, bro, you're in space. You should be dead. Like how are you still alive? I don't know, but like that scared me more of Darth Vader as a kid. Like I was just terrified. Like I could hear that. I could hear that in my I could hear that in my dreams. Like it was that deep of a movie for me. Watching that as a kid, then of course, Return of the Jedi, you get the cute Ewoks. It just still doesn't stop the nightmares, but it's another story. That's a story for my therapist, and my therapist can help me deal with. But like,
now show me where the Darth Vader hurt you.
I'm telling you, man, it was visceral. This was like a more fleshed out film than the first one, and it just was terrifying. Like it was like this was one of the first movies where you didn't have a happy ending. Like there wasn't this, super happy ending. It was like, man, we rescued Luke, but boy, we might not win this thing. Like it really was like it was the Empire striking back. Like it didn't dawn on me as a kid understanding what that truly meant, but it was a perfect, second movie to a trilogy, and it just made you want more.
Moving on to my number 2, I got A New Hope. I got the very first Star Wars movie. I'll keep it short and sweet because we're running low on time here and I want to get you guys out at a reasonable hour. But yeah, I love this movie. I think it's not just a good Star Wars movie. I think it's just a good movie. I mean, it had to lay the foundation for everything, and I think it does it so well. The character introductions, Darth Vader, Han Solo, Luke, Leia, I think they're all introduced so great, and they're all so strong as characters already in this first movie. I love the world building. I love the infiltration of the Death Star when they're going to save Princess Leia. Such simple storytelling, but sometimes simple storytelling is the best way to go. And with a movie like this, where you just want to keep it fun and entertaining and joyful, simple storytelling was the way to go. And there's also mythology and lore, and there's layers to the simplicity that it doesn't just feel so generic and played out. Especially, I mean, it came out in 1977, so it was groundbreaking at that time. But still, to this day, there's something about it that just feels unique and different from everything else that we have out there in sci-fi fiction. And I also sci-fi fantasy. And the raid on the Death Star to end it all is great. The whole movie, the way that it's put together, the pacing, the structure of it, it flies by for me whenever I put it on. I get so into the characters. I get so into the emotion. I get so into the world. A New Hope worked for me back when I was 6, and it still works for me now as a 25-year-old. So for that reason, it's going to come in as my runner-up. And we already got your number 2 and number 1 together, Ryan. So T, I think I know what it's going to be. But just let us know, what is your number 1 Star Wars movie?
My number 1 Star Wars movie is Rogue One. This is like, to me, Rogue One is such a complete story. It's such a fun story. The stakes were so high, like in this movie, and they showed that on the screen, right? Like this is our last hope to have some type of hope against the Empire. This was like, we have to get this mission done. And from a tactical standpoint, it just like what they did, how they did it, it made sense. Plus, it had Donnie Yen. I don't like Donnie Yen is a god in the action in the action world, and I thought them being able to get him for a Star Wars film like was amazing. I enjoyed everything about this movie. That last act, that whole battle, and the Darth Vader scene is the greatest Star. I don't care what anybody. That is the greatest Star Wars scene I've ever seen in my life. Like it when that lightsaber in the theater, I'm in a packed house. When that lightsaber went down, I was like, "Holy shit!" Everybody in the audience just gasped. It was like, and then he just went down and started. It was like a horror film. Like he was like Jason Voorhees in space. Like he just started mowing these guys down, and they filmed it that way too. It was the lights flickering off and on, and he's just going through, just mowing these guys. That to me was one of it is the greatest Star Wars scene that I've ever seen. Like of course, coming from what I just said about having nightmares of Darth Vader getting chased down the corridor, it was perfect, man. It was a great movie. The ending of it was like I'm not gonna lie, I teared up at the end of Rogue One because I knew their fate was sealed, but like I still had hope. Like the whole time I was happy. It's like, man, come on, you guys can make it. You guys can make it, and they got to see their last sunset, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
They got to see a bit more than sunset.
We know how Andor ends.
Yeah. So I haven't watched Andor, which I don't want to because of how high I hold Rogue One. And like I really do think this is a perfect Star Wars movie. And I'm afraid watching Andor, as with watching any of these Disney Plus shows, is going to ruin it for me. So I've just held off on that.
I do remember when Rogue One was coming out, there was that talk in the fandom where it was like, they have to kill all these characters, right? But this is Disney. Like we're gonna meet all these characters, hang out with them, and they're gonna kill them off. Like they're gonna retcon this, they're gonna ruin Star Wars, they're gonna ruin A New Hope. And no, they did it. They had the balls and they were bold enough to actually have these characters that we went through a whole movie with die at the end. And even
brutally too.
Yeah, and pretty like it felt like war. It felt like they were in a war situation and they died like they were in war. And like I said, I like this movie, even though I didn't get too attached to the characters. I always appreciated that. I always appreciated that they went for it and they did it and they killed these guys off. All right. And for me to wrap this whole thing up, my number one Star Wars movie, not just my number one Star Wars movie, but one of my favorite movies of all time is Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. For like all the reasons that everyone here has said that Empire Strikes Back is great. This is Star Wars where they were like, you know what, Star Wars, we take ourselves seriously. This is a serious franchise. We're going to give you mythology. We're going to give you the lore, and we're going to go even deeper into it with Yoda, with the Jedi, with the training of Luke. This is not just Star Wars at its peak. This is Darth Vader at his peak. Like T was mentioning in the first film, he's there, he's intimidating, but here he is a presence. Here he is just ruthless and he is so threatening. He is in full command here. When he's taking out his own people left and right, just force choking them through the FaceTime TV screen, it's so terrifying as a kid. On top of that, you get some really great development with Han and Leia's characters. The whole romance story going on there on their side quest, I think, is fantastic, as well as they're being chased by the Empire. And then it all comes together on Cloud City with Darth Vader setting the trap for Luke. And you just, there's countless iconic moments in this movie, just like the battle at the beginning on the snow planet, which I'm forgetting the name of at the moment, with the AT-ATs.
Hoth, but yeah.
Hoth, thank you. The battle on Hoth. Like said, Yoda training Luke losing his hand, fighting Vader. I love you. I know. Like, there's just so many moments in this that are just so iconic, and they're so iconic because the world works, the character works, the story works, the mythology works, and it's never worked better for me personally than it has in The Empire Strikes Back. So for that reason, Empire Strikes Back is my number one. It is my favorite Star Wars movie. And with all that said, guys, my real last place is the Clone Wars movie, because that was awful.
Thank you!
Anyways, the real last place.
Yeah, all right.
Just to give Solo a little bit more credit, my real last place is the Clone Wars movie. That thing was terrible. Yeah. We got Ace in the chat actually saying that he can't make it today, but may the 4th be with you. Thank you, dude. Back at you.
And also with you.
And also with you. And he's also given us his rankings. I believe this is probably one to last place. He's got Revenge of the Sith, Empire, Return of the Jedi, Rogue One, New Hope, Force Awakens, Attack of the Clones, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, Solo, and Phantom Menace, I believe, is at the bottom. Unless I'm reading that backwards, in which case, hot takes, man. Hot takes.
Yeah, it has to be top to bottom. There's no way Phantom Menace is anybody's number one. But then again, who knows?
Yeah,
other than that is it, guys. That is the show. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for ranking the Star Wars movies. Happy May the 4th. And if you're watching this Monday, I know it's not May the 4th anymore, but May the 4th be with you regardless.
May the 4th be with you.
Yes.
I want to thank you guys so much for not just being members, not just for being here, but for giving me all your time, because we went way overboard. This is a mega-sized episode. Please tell the people where they can find you. T, let's start with you.
All right. You can find me at Have You Seen That with T, my YouTube channel. Also on Letterboxd. Have you seen that? And I just dropped my Fall Guy review. Check out the review. Go check out the Fall Guy. It is so much fun.
You can find me on Letterboxd and YouTube at Movie Reviews with Ryan Lane. I release about 2 movie reviews a week. I've got my Fall Guy review that I'll be posting later today, and I'll be reviewing the old Mad Max movies in preparation for the Furiosa prequel.
And you guys can find me right here as always. Thank you so much for joining us once again. The Force will be with you always.